three passengers emerged from the house like they were stepping onto a red carpet. Two women in their mid-30s, designer sunglasses perched on their heads, carried shopping bags that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly car payment. Between them walked a man in a polo shirt with a logo Marcus didn't recognize, his wrist catching the light with what looked like a Rolex. Finally, the blonde woman said as she opened the back door, not looking at Marcus. "I thought he'd never get here." Marcus smiled politely through the rearview mirror. "Good afternoon. I'm Marcus. Heading to the Pinnacle, right?" The man slid into the front passenger seat without asking, immediately adjusting the air conditioning vent toward his face. "It's like a sauna in here. Don't you know how to keep a car cool?" "I had it running and cooled down before you arrived, sir," Marcus said evenly, his hands tightening imperceptibly on the wheel. The temperature's set to 72 degrees. "Well, it feels hot," the brunette woman chimed in from the back, fanning herself dramatically. "Brittany, did you see that Mercedes we passed? That's what we should be riding in, not this economy car." Marcus pulled away from the curb, keeping his eyes on the road. He'd learned long ago that engaging only made things worse. The blonde woman, Brittany, laughed, a sharp sound that felt like broken glass. "You know what Tyler told me? He said these drivers make, like, minimum wage. Can you imagine doing this for a living?" The man in the front seat scrolled through his phone, his thumb moving with casual indifference. "My buddy owns a Tesla. That's a real car. This thing probably smells like the last 50 people who sat in it." He wrinkled his nose for effect. Marcus's jaw clenched. The car was spotless. He'd spent an hour that morning vacuuming, wiping down surfaces, and hanging a fresh air freshener. He'd always taken pride in his vehicle, treating it like the small business it essentially was. But he said nothing, just merged onto the main boulevard as the traffic light turned green. "Oh my God, Brittany, remember that driver last week?" the brunette continued, her voice dripping with amusement. "The one who tried to make conversation? Like, I don't pay for rides to hear about someone's life problems. Right?" Brittany said, examining her nails. "It's so awkward when they try to be friendly. Just drive and be quiet, you know? That's literally all we're asking." The man turned slightly toward Marcus, as if noticing him for the first time as an actual person. "Hey, driver, what's your name again?" "Marcus? You got any other job prospects, or is this it for you?" He didn't wait for an answer. "Because, no offense, but this seems like something you do when you've got no other options." Marcus's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. The photo of Sarah trembled slightly as they hit a bump in the road. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, could taste the bitterness rising in his throat. But he swallowed it down, kept his face neutral, and stayed silent. Because he needed the fare. Because he needed every 5-star rating he could get. Because speaking up meant risking everything he'd worked so hard to build. The car filled with their laughter, casual and cruel, as if he wasn't even there. The traffic thickened as they approached downtown, brake lights flickering like red fireflies in the hazy afternoon. Marcus navigated through the congestion with practiced ease, but inside his chest, something heavy was settling, a familiar weight he'd carried too many times before. At a red light on Commerce Street, a woman in a nearby SUV glanced over and made brief eye contact with Marcus. For a moment, he thought he saw recognition in her eyes, perhaps an acknowledgement of what might be happening in his car. But then the light changed, and she looked away, accelerating forward into her own life, her own concerns. The moment dissolved like it had never existed. "Did you see the way he's gripping that steering wheel?" the man in the front seat said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Dude looks stressed. Maybe this job's too much for him." Brittany leaned forward between the seats, her perfume, something expensive and overwhelming, filling the small space. "Are we going the right way? Because I feel like we should be there by now." "You're not taking some long route to jack up the fare, are you?" Marcus's throat felt tight. "This is the fastest route according to the app, ma'am. There's construction on Riverside, so we're taking the bypass." According to the app, the brunette mimicked in a mocking tone. "Like we don't know this city.
Brittany, your driver last week got you to the pinnacle in 15 minutes.
That was a Tuesday morning, not Friday afternoon traffic, Marcus said quietly, immediately regretting opening his mouth.
Oh, so now he's got an attitude, the man said, turning to face the women in the back. You hear that? We're paying for this service, and he's talking back.
Marcus felt something crack inside him, not breaking entirely, but fracturing. He thought about his daughter, about the scholarship letters that had come last month, about the extra shifts he'd been picking up to help cover what financial aid wouldn't. He thought about his ex-wife's medical bills, about the rent that was due in 6 days, about the oil change his car desperately needed. He thought about every reason he had to stay quiet, to endure, to shrink himself into invisibility. But the humiliation sat in his stomach like a stone. Each comment, each laugh, each casual cruelty added another layer to the shame. He could feel his face burning, could feel the prickle of frustrated tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. He blinked them back hard. Through the rearview mirror, he watched other cars passing, families, couples, solo drivers, all sealed in their own worlds. None of them could see what was happening in his car. None of them would intervene even if they could. He was alone with this, as he'd been alone with every other indignity this job had thrown at him. The brunette was scrolling through her phone now, occasionally showing the screen to Brittany, both of them laughing at something. The man had reclined his seat slightly, his expensive shoes now resting near Marcus's gearshift. They'd moved on, their entertainment found and discarded, while Marcus drove on in silence. The weight in his chest grew heavier. His breathing felt shallow. And the city stretched out before him, indifferent and vast, offering no comfort and no escape. Stop for a moment and think about Marcus. Think about the last time someone made you feel small. Maybe it was a boss who dismissed your ideas in a meeting. Maybe it was a stranger who cut in front of you in line and acted like you didn't exist. Maybe it was someone who looked right through you as if you were invisible, as if your dignity didn't matter, as if your humanity was optional. Now imagine carrying that feeling every single day. Imagine swallowing your pride not once, but dozens of times a shift. Imagine smiling when you want to scream. Imagine saying thank you to people who treat you like furniture. Marcus isn't a character in a story, he's every person who's ever served you coffee, delivered your packages, cleaned your office, or driven you somewhere. He's every worker who's been told their labor is appreciated while their humanity is ignored. He's the father working 3 jobs to send his daughter to college. He's the man who prints out 5-star review goals and tapes them to his bathroom mirror because he knows his family's security depends on strangers' generosity. And here's the thing that should make your blood boil: this happens every day. In cars, in restaurants, in retail stores, in hotel lobbies. People in positions of temporary power wielding cruelty like it's a birthright. People who've confused wealth with worth, who've mistaken privilege for permission to degrade others. The passengers in Marcus's car aren't villains from a movie. They're real. You've probably seen them. Maybe you've been silent when you witnessed it. Maybe, and this is the hardest truth, maybe you've been them, even just once, even just a little. So ask yourself, what would you do if you were in the car behind Marcus right now, stopped at a red light, watching this unfold through the window? Would you look away like that woman in the SUV? Would you tell yourself it's none of your business? Would you convince yourself that you're just one person, that speaking up wouldn't change anything? Or would you remember that every act of injustice continues because good people choose silence over disruption? Marcus's story isn't over yet. But what happens next depends on someone deciding that enough is enough. It depends on someone believing that human dignity isn't negotiable, that cruelty doesn't deserve an audience, that one voice can shatter the illusion that abuse is acceptable. Keep reading. Because what happens in the next few minutes will remind you why courage matters. The Pinnacle's entrance appeared ahead, its glass facade reflecting the burnt orange of the setting sun. Marcus signaled to turn into the curved driveway where luxury cars idled in a choreographed dance of arrivals and departures. Valets in burgundy vests moved with practiced efficiency, opening doors, offering hands, smiling with the kind of professionalism that came from knowing your tip depended on invisibility. But something shifted in the air. It started as a feeling, a change in pressure, like the moment before a thunderstorm when the atmosphere holds its breath. The laughter in the back seat had grown louder, more performative, as if the proximity to their destination had emboldened them further. The man in the front seat was showing Brittany something on his phone, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of mockery. Then Marcus heard it. A new sound, barely audible at first beneath the cruel symphony. A sharp intake of breath. A small, almost imperceptible gasp from somewhere behind the brunette woman. He glanced in the rearview mirror, his eyes scanning the back seat more carefully. There, pressed against the far window behind Brittany, was a fourth passenger he hadn't noticed before. How had he missed her? She must have been so quiet, so still, that she'd blended into the background of the chaos. A young woman, maybe in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore scrubs, medical scrubs in a faded blue, and her canvas tote bag was wedged between her feet. Her face was turned toward the window, but Marcus could see her reflection in the glass. She'd been listening to everything. Hearing every word. Witnessing every moment. The light changed. Marcus pressed the brake, and the car slowed to a stop. In that moment of stillness, the young woman's eyes met his in the rearview mirror. They weren't the eyes of someone looking away, of someone choosing comfortable silence. They blazed with something Marcus hadn't seen in a very long time. Recognition. Solidarity. Rage. The air in the car felt different now, charged with potential energy. The sun slipped lower, casting long shadows through the windshield. The sounds of the shopping complex, car doors closing, heels clicking on pavement, the distant fountain in the plaza seemed to fade into a strange, expectant quiet. Something was about to break. "Excuse me." The voice cut through the noise like a scalpel, precise, controlled, and utterly calm. The laughter stopped mid-breath. The man in the front seat turned, his phone still raised. Brittany's hand froze halfway to her designer purse. The young woman in scrubs leaned forward slowly, deliberately, her movements carrying the kind of authority that didn't need volume. Her name tag, Marcus could now see, read Dr. Sarah Chen, Emergency Medicine, St. Michael's Hospital. The irony of the shared last name wasn't lost on him, though they were no relation. "I said, excuse me," she repeated, her voice still even, still controlled. "I need to say something before we arrive." The brunette turned, annoyed. "Who even are you? We didn't realize anyone else was." "I'm someone who's been listening to you for the past 15 minutes, Dr. Chen interrupted, her dark eyes moving from face to face with surgical precision. "And I think it's important that you understand exactly what I've heard." She wasn't yelling. She wasn't emotional. That was what made it so powerful. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent years delivering life and death news to families, someone who'd learned that true authority didn't require volume, it required certainty. The man shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Look, lady, I don't know what you think." "I think," Dr. Chen said, and now there was an edge beneath the calm, like steel wrapped in silk, "that you've spent this entire ride treating another human being like he's invisible. Like his dignity is negotiable. Like cruelty is just another form of entertainment for you." Brittany's face flushed. "We were just joking around. It's not that serious." "Not that serious?" Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. "Let me tell you what I do for a living. I work 70-hour weeks trying to save lives. Yesterday, I held the hand of a single father while he died because a drunk driver ran a red light. He was an Uber driver, actually. Had 2 kids at home waiting for him. He'd picked up 4 passengers that night who never even asked his name. The silence in the car was absolute now. Even the sounds from outside seemed to have retreated, leaving only her voice. This man," she gestured toward Marcus without breaking eye contact with the others, "woke up this morning and chose to be professional. To be kind. To provide you a service. And you," she paused, letting the weight settle, "you chose to use your temporary position of power to make him feel worthless." Dr. Chen reached into her tote bag, pulled out her phone, and held it up. "I recorded the last 10 minutes of this ride. Every word. Every laugh. Every cruel comment." The color drained from Brittany's face. "You can't, that's illegal. You can't record people without Actually, Dr. Chen said, her voice now carrying the faintest hint of steel, in this state, only one party needs to consent to a recording.
I'm that party. And what I captured isn't just rude behavior, it's potential evidence of harassment and creating a hostile work environment.
The man in the front seat tried to recover his composure.
Look, you're overreacting. We didn't mean anything by it. Right, Marcus?
He turned, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace.
We were just having fun, weren't we?
Marcus's hands were still on the steering wheel, his knuckles less white now but his heart pounding harder than before. He opened his mouth, but Dr. Chen spoke first.
Don't, she said sharply. Don't you dare try to make him complicit in your cruelty. Don't ask him to absolve you because you know his livelihood depends on a 5-star rating. That's not accountability, that's coercion.
She leaned back slightly, her eyes never leaving them.
Here's what's going to happen. When we arrive, you're going to exit this vehicle without another word. You're going to leave a 5-star rating and a generous tip, and I mean generous, not your usual 7%. And then you're going to think very carefully about how you treat people whose labor you depend on.
The brunette's voice came out small, defensive.
Or what? You'll post that recording online? That's blackmail.
No, Dr. Chen said quietly.
That's consequence. You spent 15 minutes teaching this man that his dignity doesn't matter. I'm spending 2 minutes teaching you that it does. Whether I ever use this recording isn't the point. The point is that you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that someone was watching. That someone stood up. That your actions don't exist in a vacuum.
Marcus felt something strange happening in his chest, a loosening of that heavy weight, a warmth spreading where coldness had settled.
He glanced in the rearview mirror and caught Dr. Chen's eye.
She gave him the smallest nod, a gesture of solidarity that said, I see you.
You matter. You're not alone.
The car rolled to a stop in front of the Pinnacle's entrance. The valet approached, reaching for the door handle. Dr. Chen's hand moved to the door, but she paused, looking directly at Marcus.
What's your daughter's name? She asked gently. The girl in the photo.
Marcus's voice came out rough, emotion thick in his throat.
Sarah. She's starting college next month. Pre-med. Dr. Chen smiled a real smile, warm and genuine. Pre-med. That's wonderful.
You must be incredibly proud.
I am, Marcus whispered.
She turned back to the 3 passengers, her expression hardening again.
You see that? You spent this whole ride and never once asked about that photo.
Never once saw him as a father, as a person with dreams and struggles and people he loves.
You saw a service, not a soul. The valet opened the door.
The man climbed out quickly, avoiding everyone's eyes. Brittany and the brunette followed, their earlier confidence completely shattered. They stood on the curb, uncertain, diminished.
Dr. Chen was the last to exit.
But before she did, she reached into her bag and pulled out a business card, pressing it into Marcus's hand. My brother owns a medical transport company, she said quietly, so only he could hear.
They're hiring drivers.
Better pay, better hours, better respect.
Call that number and mention my name.
You deserve better than this. Marcus stared at the card in his hand, his vision blurring slightly.
The embossed lettering read Chen Medical Transport Services with a phone number and an address across town.
He looked up at Dr. Chen, standing outside his car door, and for a moment couldn't find words adequate to express what was rising in his chest.
I don't know what to say, he managed finally.
You don't have to say anything, she replied, her voice soft now, the steel replaced with kindness.
Just promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll call.
And promise me that when your daughter becomes a doctor, and she will, I can tell, you'll remind her that medicine isn't just about knowledge.
It's about seeing people. Really seeing them.
She glanced back at the 3 passengers, who stood frozen near the entrance, watching this exchange with expressions caught between shame and discomfort. Marcus nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Dr. Chen smiled once more, then turned and walked away, not toward the Pinnacle where the others waited, but but in the opposite direction, toward the parking structure.
She'd never been going shopping with them at all.
She'd simply been another passenger, returning from a shift, heading to her own car. The valet approached Marcus's window.
"Sir? Are you all right?" Marcus wiped his eyes quickly and nodded. Yeah, I'm good." He looked at his phone. The ride had ended. A notification appeared, 5 stars.
Then another, a tip of $200 with a note that read simply, "We're sorry." It wasn't signed, but Marcus knew it had come from one of the 3, perhaps all of them, splitting it. Whether it came from genuine remorse or fear of that recording, he didn't know. Right now, he didn't care. What mattered was the card in his hand. What mattered was the way Dr. Chen had said his daughter's name with respect, had acknowledged his humanity when 3 others had tried to erase it. What mattered was that for 15 minutes, he'd felt invisible and worthless, and then in less than 5 minutes, someone had reminded him that he was neither. He put the car in drive and pulled away from the pinnacle, merging back into traffic. The sun was setting fully now, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. His hands on the steering wheel felt different, not lighter, exactly, but steadier. The photo of Sarah swayed gently as he turned onto the boulevard, her smile seeming brighter somehow in the dying light. Marcus drove 3 more blocks before pulling into a quiet side street. He parked, picked up his phone, and stared at Dr. Chen's business card for a long moment. Then he took a photo of it, saved the number in his contacts, and carefully tucked the card into his wallet where he kept Sarah's baby picture and his mother's prayer card. Tomorrow, he'd make the call. Tonight, he'd drive home and tell his daughter about what happened, not the humiliation, though he'd mention it, but the moment after. The moment when a stranger became a guardian angel. The moment when someone proved that dignity, once defended, could never truly be taken away. He pulled back onto the road, and for the first time in 3 years of driving, Marcus Chen smiled. There's an old saying that the true measure of a person isn't how they treat their equals, but how they treat those who can do nothing for them. Marcus learned that lesson the hard way, on the receiving end of cruelty from people who saw his service as permission to diminish his humanity. But he also learned its inverse, that goodness, when it appears, shines brightest in the darkness. Dr. Sarah Chen didn't have to speak up. She could have stayed silent, avoided confrontation, let the uncomfortable moment pass like that woman in the SUV at the traffic light. She could have told herself it wasn't her business, that getting involved might make things awkward, that one person's voice wouldn't change anything. But she understood something that too many people forget: silence in the face of cruelty is its own form of participation. What happened in that car wasn't extraordinary because a doctor stood up to rude passengers. It was extraordinary because it revealed a truth we all need to remember, that our smallest actions ripple outward in ways we can't always see. Dr. Chen gave Marcus more than a business card and a defense. She gave him back his dignity. She reminded him that his work has value, that his struggles matter, that his humanity is non-negotiable. And those 3 passengers learned something too, whether they wanted to or not. They learned that the world is always watching, that karma doesn't always wait for another lifetime, and that the people they dismiss as invisible might have guardians they never noticed. They learned that cruelty has a price, even if that price is just the weight of shame they'll carry every time they remember that ride. But here's the question that matters most, the one that should follow you long after you've finished reading this story. When you witness injustice, whether it's someone berating a server, mocking a clerk, or dismissing a driver, what will you do? Will you be the person in the SUV who looks away? Will you be the bystander who tells themselves it's not their problem? Or will you be Dr. Chen, the person who understands that defending someone's dignity is never an inconvenience, it's a responsibility? Because here's the truth, the world is full of people like Marcus, working hard, swallowing their pride, carrying burdens you can't see. And the world is also full of people like those 3 passengers, wielding cruelty like it's a birthright. Which side you're on isn't determined by what you believe, it's determined by what you do when it matters most. So tell us, have you ever witnessed someone being treated like Marcus was? Did you speak up, or did you stay silent? And if you stayed silent then, what would you do differently now? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Share your story. Because every time someone speaks up, it gets a little easier for the next person to do the same. And maybe, just maybe, we can create a world where people like Marcus don't have to wait for a guardian angel, because all of us will choose to be one.